found my cheating wife's texts about waiting for my inheritance, and my response made her beg at family dinner like a defendant facing a federal judge. I'm Robert Harrison, 43 years old, and for 17 years I believed my marriage to Victoria was built on the same bedrock as my family's generational wealth. We lived in a restored Georgian manor in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of property that whispers old money through hand-carved crown molding and oil portraits of railroad barons who built the Harrison fortune. I manage the Harrison Family Trust, overseeing diversified investments and philanthropic foundations worth $52 million that would transfer to my children upon my death, with Victoria receiving substantial spousal benefits as outlined in our prenuptial agreement. Victoria operated an exclusive art consultancy for wealthy collectors, a sophisticated business that perfectly complemented our social circle of tech executives and old Connecticut families. To our community, we were the successful couple who honored tradition while building modern prosperity. To me, we were partners creating something permanent for future generations. To Victoria, as I was about to discover, we were apparently just an inconvenient waiting period before real wealth became accessible. The Harrison Trust represented 4 generations of careful stewardship, structured with the paranoid precision that only old money understands. My great-grandfather had established ironclad provisions protecting family wealth from exactly the kind of exploitation I was about to uncover. The trust included spendthrift clauses, discretionary distribution mechanisms, and most importantly, automatic transfer provisions that would make Victoria a very wealthy woman upon my death. At 43, with excellent health and active lifestyle, that seemed like a comfortable, distant future. Victoria apparently had different timeline expectations. The red flags accumulated like suspicious transactions in a trust audit, each one small enough to rationalize individually but devastating when analyzed systematically. My fiduciary background teaches you that the most dangerous threats to family wealth are insider operations, conducted by people with legitimate access who exploit trust to manipulate financial systems for personal gain. February brought Victoria's sudden fascination with my family's medical history, asking detailed questions about cardiac conditions and life expectancy patterns with curiosity that seemed caring rather than calculating. March introduced weekend wellness retreats focused on stress management and longevity, topics she'd never previously discussed despite our comfortable lifestyle and excellent healthcare. April saw the introduction of mysterious financial conversations she'd taken other rooms, speaking in hushed tones about investment opportunities and estate planning strategies that required immediate attention at unusual hours. When I offered to review potential investments together, she'd explain that art market opportunities required confidentiality protocols that made sharing details inappropriate before deals were finalized. May brought the dead bedroom situation that developed like a slow portfolio decline. Victoria always had legitimate reasons for avoiding intimacy: exhaustion from demanding collector clients, stress from art market volatility, hormonal fluctuations that killed her desire for physical connection. But she had endless energy for increasingly frequent networking events with wealthy collectors who appreciated her sophisticated expertise. June introduced Marcus Webb, a private wealth advisor who existed only in carefully edited stories. She'd mention him casually, always in professional contexts, describing him as a consultant helping her navigate complex estate planning strategies for her high-net-worth clients. Looking back, I realized she was conditioning me to accept his presence in her life, making him seem boring and safe rather than exciting and dangerous. July brought client entertainment events that required Victoria's presence at exclusive venues where art collectors conducted business through sophisticated social interactions that stretched past midnight, always coinciding with my quarterly trust management responsibilities. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late September that would expose 17 years of marriage as elaborate financial strategy. I'd been reviewing trust documentation in my home study, analyzing performance reports and updating beneficiary structures for our children's educational foundations, when I noticed Victoria had left our shared iPad charging on my desk. The device was unlocked, displaying a message notification that would shatter 17 years of trust beyond repair. The text was from Marcus, and the preview made my blood freeze. Timeline confirmed. How long before natural causes accelerate our schedule? Need to finalize relocation plans before he becomes suspicious of our relationship? My fiduciary expertise activated with automatic precision, analyzing the conversation like fraudulent transactions in a trust investigation. I opened the message thread and found months of systematic planning that demonstrated calculated deception with sophisticated financial awareness. The Harrison Trust transfers automatically upon Robert's death, Victoria had written, with clinical detachment. 52 million plus real estate holdings and foundation control. I'm just waiting for his inheritance to become accessible. Then we can execute permanent relocation to Monaco, where extradition treaties are favorable. The messages continued with tactical details that made my hands shake with rage rather than grief. His family has history of cardiac issues. Men typically don't survive past 60. We just need patience and careful positioning to avoid suspicion. Marcus's responses showed equal callousness. 17 years of marriage establishes clear inheritance rights under Connecticut law. Once the trust transfers, we'll have everything we need for permanent disappearance. They weren't just planning adultery, they were discussing my death with the casual indifference of people reviewing quarterly earnings reports. But the message that transformed heartbreak into strategic fury was Victoria's response from earlier that week. Robert's been working 18-hour days managing the foundation's expansion. The stress is aging him rapidly, which actually accelerates our timeline. I estimate we have maybe 15 years before natural causes solve our patient's problem. She was analyzing my deteriorating health like a portfolio manager studying market trends, calculating how my professional dedication might expedite her access to generational wealth. That evening, I sat in our library, surrounded by trust documents and family portraits that suddenly felt like evidence in a criminal case. The woman I'd trusted with 17 years of my life had been conducting financial reconnaissance on generational wealth while calculating my life expectancy for strategic planning purposes. Instead of confronting her immediately and allowing emotional reactions to compromise my strategic advantage, I made a calculated decision that would transform me from victim to prosecutor. The Harrison Family Trust included provisions I'd hoped never to activate: mechanisms for protecting family wealth from exploitation, clauses for disinheriting beneficiaries who demonstrated financial manipulation, and most importantly, emergency procedures for exposing systematic deception with legal precision that would make her beg for mercy she didn't deserve. The discovery of Victoria's inheritance calculations didn't devastate me. It activated something infinitely more dangerous than heartbreak. The moment I read her clinical analysis of my life expectancy and timeline for accessing Harrison family wealth, I stopped being her husband and became her fiduciary adversary. My trust management expertise, honed through decades of protecting generational wealth from exactly this type of exploitation, now found its most personal and devastating application. She thought I was an inconvenient obstacle between her and $52 million. She was about to discover that challenging a trust manager who'd spent his career detecting beneficiary fraud was the most expensive mistake she could make. Instead of confronting Victoria immediately and allowing emotional reactions to compromise my strategic advantage, I did what Harrisons have always done when threatened. I audited the threat and weaponized the rules. I screen recorded the entire message thread, scrolled methodically to capture dates, timestamps, and contact information, then exported encrypted backups to 3 separate drives and a cloud vault that only the trustees could access. I photographed the unlocked iPad beside the conversation as chain of custody documentation, then created a comprehensive evidence package with timestamp watermarks and sealed the pages in legal evidence sleeves. At exactly 7:12 a.m., I contacted Eleanor Park, our family trust counsel, a woman whose legal mind operates like a precision instrument. I didn't dramatize or seek emotional support. I read the texts verbatim. The messages about waiting for his inheritance, the timeline discussions, the Monaco relocation plans. Eleanor didn't gasp or express shock. She asked 2 critical questions. Is the device jointly owned? Yes. Is the account authenticated to her? Yes. Then we have grounds to move immediately. Within 20 minutes, my inbox contained a document titled Emergency Marital Trust Integrity Protocol with a comprehensive action plan. Step 1. Amend beneficiary designations on all revocable assets using my prenuptial authority. Step 2. Trigger the trust's Bad Acts Clause, a provision that automatically disqualifies any spouse who conspires to exploit the settlor or manipulate inheritance through fraud, coercion, or malicious planning. Step 3. Implement protective filings, including temporary estate plan revisions, healthcare proxy rescission, and durable power of attorney revocation. While Eleanor drafted the legal documentation, I contacted Jake Morrison, the private investigator who'd worked corporate fraud cases for my business clients. Treat this like systematic financial crime, I instructed. I need comprehensive intelligence on phones, locations, communications, and whoever this Marcus Webb really is. Jake understood immediately that this wasn't emotional surveillance, but forensic investigation requiring courtroom-quality evidence. Jake's preliminary research on Marcus revealed disturbing patterns that extended far beyond simple adultery. Marcus wasn't just a private wealth advisor. He was a registered representative with multiple compliance violations, 2 quiet terminations disguised as career transitions, and a pending arbitration case involving inappropriate estate planning influence with elderly clients. Most importantly, he was married to Patricia Webb, a corporate attorney who had hired her own investigator 6 months earlier to document his suspicious activities. Eleanor returned to my study with a 3-inch binder containing documents that would protect Harrison family wealth with ironclad legal precision. We moved assets from my revocable trust into a new asset protection subtrust under the family trust's umbrella, shifted the manor into a Harrison legacy entity that operated like a financial fortress, and replaced Victoria on every survivorship designation we could lawfully modify. The Bad Acts Clause notification, drafted in classic Harrison legal prose, read, "Preliminary evidence suggests conduct incompatible with beneficiary status. Discretionary distributions are suspended pending comprehensive review." That afternoon, Jake arranged a discreet meeting with Patricia Webb at a neutral location where attorneys conduct sensitive business away from public scrutiny. Patricia arrived with the composed authority of someone who'd been systematically building a case for months. When she reviewed my printed evidence, her reaction was professionally satisfied rather than surprised. "Marcus has a documented pattern," she explained, sliding her own evidence folder across the table. "He targets women with access to significant wealth, manipulates them into believing they deserve more than their current situations provide, then uses their connections to exploit estate planning opportunities." Patricia's documentation revealed that Marcus had been conducting similar schemes with multiple wealthy spouses, using his wealth management position to identify vulnerable targets and manipulate their access to family trusts and inheritance structures. Victoria wasn't his first accomplice. She was simply his most recent mark in a systematic pattern of inheritance manipulation that had been operating for years. Our alliance formed around shared betrayal and complementary resources that would prove devastating to their criminal enterprise. Patricia had legal firepower, institutional knowledge of Marcus's manipulation tactics, and prosecutorial contacts who specialized in complex financial fraud. I had real-time access to Victoria's communications, comprehensive trust protection mechanisms, and fiduciary expertise that could trace money through any sophisticated scheme they'd developed. The investigation revealed that Victoria and Marcus had been conducting systematic research into Harrison family wealth, studying trust structures, analyzing my health patterns, and developing financial projections based on various timeline scenarios. They'd consulted with offshore attorneys about asset hiding, researched jurisdictions with favorable inheritance laws, and even explored methods for accelerating trust distributions through manufactured emergencies or health crises. But their most significant error was underestimating the comprehensive protective mechanisms built into generational wealth structures by people who'd spent centuries defending family assets from exactly this type of exploitation. The Harrison Family Trust included provisions I'd hoped never to activate: emergency procedures for protecting beneficiaries, clauses for exposing systematic deception, and, most importantly, mechanisms for ensuring that anyone who attempted to manipulate family wealth would face consequences that extended far beyond simple disinheritance. The emotional transformation within me was complete and irreversible. The trusting husband who'd shared intimate financial information and family legacy details had been replaced by something infinitely more dangerous: a trust manager with unlimited resources and generational expertise in protecting family wealth from sophisticated threats. Victoria had been calculating my death timeline like portfolio projections while conducting systematic reconnaissance on $52 million in family assets. As I prepared for Sunday's family dinner, I realized that Victoria's casual text about waiting for his inheritance had triggered the most comprehensive trust protection operation in Harrison family history. She was about to discover that the most expensive mistake anyone can make is targeting generational wealth managers for systematic exploitation while underestimating their capabilities for legal warfare that would make her beg for mercy she didn't deserve. Eleanor Park and Patricia Webb transformed our shared commitment to justice into a comprehensive legal warfare operation, combining trust protection expertise with matrimonial litigation capabilities that would destroy Victoria and Marcus's inheritance scheme with surgical precision. Our coordination operated from Eleanor's private office, where Harrison family legal matters had been conducted for 3 generations, complete with secure communications and evidence vaults that could withstand any legal challenge. The documentation we compiled was staggering: systematic inheritance manipulation spanning months, offshore asset research targeting $52 million, and detailed timeline calculations for my death that demonstrated premeditated financial exploitation disguised as marriage. Eleanor's trust protection mechanisms revealed the sophisticated nature of Victoria's criminal enterprise with legal precision. She'd been using her art consultancy connections to research offshore banking structures, while Marcus analyzed trust distribution patterns through his wealth management access. They'd coordinate systematic intelligence gathering about Harrison family assets disguised as supportive spouse behavior, preparing comprehensive inheritance theft that would exploit generational wealth through sophisticated legal manipulation once my natural timeline expired according to their calculations. The venue selection required strategic precision worthy of a trust litigation operation. Our traditional Sunday Harrison family dinner at the Manor brought together 3 generations monthly to discuss family business, philanthropic activities, and trust management decisions. Victoria had been particularly excited about this dinner, mentioning how important it was for strengthening relationships with family members who influence trust distributions. The setting was perfect: private enough for comprehensive confrontation, traditional enough that family authority would be respected, and intimate enough that no one could escape what was about to unfold with devastating legal precision. Eleanor arranged comprehensive documentation disguised as routine family business review. The Bad Acts Clause notification had been refined into a masterpiece of trust law, citing specific text messages, timeline calculations, and inheritance manipulation attempts that would permanently disqualify Victoria from any Harrison family benefits. Asset protection measures had moved $52 million beyond her reach through legal mechanisms so sophisticated that even successful challenges would take decades to penetrate. Sunday evening arrived with deceptive tranquility that masked the approaching legal storm. Victoria wore her most elegant black dress and Harrison family diamonds, looking every inch the sophisticated spouse who belonged in generational wealth circles. She had no idea that her casual text about waiting for his inheritance had triggered the most comprehensive trust protection operation in Harrison family history, or that state prosecutors were reviewing her timeline calculations for potential criminal charges. The mahogany dining table gleamed under crystal chandeliers as 3 generations of Harrisons gathered for what Victoria believed would strengthen her position within family legacy circles. My parents, my sister Catherine and her husband, and our children took their customary seats while Victoria radiated confident charm, completely absorbed in networking opportunities that would never materialize. Eleanor arrived as my legal counsel reviewing routine trust matters, while Patricia entered as a colleague consulting on estate planning updates. As dessert concluded, I stood and addressed the family with the measured authority I used for trust presentations. Before we adjourn, I need to discuss urgent matters affecting the Harrison family trust's integrity. Victoria's confident smile flickered as Eleanor distributed leather portfolios to each family member. Recent evidence has revealed systematic attempts to manipulate trust distributions through inheritance fraud and timeline manipulation. I activated the dining room's presentation screen, displaying Victoria's text messages with forensic clarity. I'm just waiting for his inheritance to become accessible, then Monaco, where extradition treaties are favorable. The room went silent as my father's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Victoria's face drained of color as the next message appeared. Robert's family history suggests men rarely survive past 60. Stress is aging him rapidly, which accelerates our timeline. These communications, I continued with prosecutorial precision, detail systematic planning to exploit my death for financial gain, coordinate offshore asset hiding, and manipulate trust distributions through calculated deception. Eleanor stood, her voice carrying legal authority that made every word feel like a verdict. The Harrison Family Trust's Bad Acts Clause is hereby activated, permanently disqualifying Mrs. Harrison from any distributions due to documented financial manipulation and inheritance fraud. Victoria's performance collapsed completely. She pushed back from the table, hands trembling as she attempted damage control. "Robert, please, this is a misunderstanding. Those texts are taken out of context. Marcus is just a business associate who—" Patricia interrupted with clinical precision. "Mrs. Harrison, Marcus is my husband. He's currently under investigation for systematic client manipulation and securities fraud. Your communications provide evidence of conspiracy to commit inheritance theft." The evidence continued displaying, with devastating effect, offshore banking research, timeline calculations based on my health patterns, and financial projections showing $52 million in anticipated inheritance. My sister gasped audibly, while my father's expression hardened with patriarchal authority that had protected Harrison wealth for generations. "Victoria," he said with quiet fury, "you calculated my son's death like a business transaction." That's when Victoria broke completely. She fell to her knees beside my chair, grasping my arm with desperate urgency. "Robert, please, I'm begging you. I was scared, lonely, manipulated by Marcus. I never meant harm to you or the children. Don't destroy 17 years over stupid messages. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Please, don't take everything away." Her begging continued as Eleanor presented the separation agreement and asset freeze documentation. "The manor, the trust distributions, the family legacy, all protected from your manipulation," Eleanor announced with legal finality. Victoria's sobs echoed through the dining room as she realized the complete scope of her destruction. "I'll sign anything, give up anything, just don't leave me with nothing. I was waiting for your inheritance because I was terrified of never belonging to real wealth. Please, Robert, have mercy." But mercy wasn't available for someone who'd calculated my death timeline like portfolio projections. As security changed the manor's access codes and Patricia served additional legal documentation, Victoria's casual text about inheritance had cost her everything she'd schemed to steal. The Harrison family dinner had delivered exactly what I'd promised: comprehensive legal destruction that made her beg for forgiveness she didn't deserve. Victoria's desperate begging echoed through the Harrison Manor's formal dining room like a defendant pleading before a federal judge, witnessed by 3 generations who would never forget her calculated betrayal of family trust. She remained on her knees beside my chair, clutching my arm with trembling hands while tears streamed down her face. "Robert, please, I'm begging you with everything I have left. Don't destroy me completely over stupid text messages. I was lonely, manipulated, terrified of never truly belonging to real wealth. Please show mercy." My father's patriarchal authority filled the room as he stood, his voice carrying the cold precision that had protected Harrison wealth through 4 generations of threats and exploitation attempts. "Victoria, you calculated my son's death like a quarterly earnings report. You researched offshore banking while wearing my mother's diamonds. You planned inheritance theft while raising my grandchildren. There is no mercy for someone who schedules family members' deaths for financial convenience." Eleanor stepped forward with legal documents that would formalize Victoria's complete destruction. "Mrs. Harrison, the Bad Acts Clause has been unanimously activated by the Trust Board. You have 72 hours to vacate the manor and surrender all Harrison family property. These separation agreements eliminate any claim to spousal support, property division, or trust distributions. She placed the thick legal folder on the mahogany table with finality that sounded like a gavel striking. Victoria's panic escalated as she processed the scope of her legal annihilation. "Eleanor, please, there must be some provision for transition support. I have no income, no assets, nowhere to go. 17 years of marriage must count for something under Connecticut law. I'll accept supervised access to the children, limited spousal support, anything to avoid complete destitution." Her voice cracked with genuine terror as she realized the comprehensive nature of her financial destruction. Patricia Webb stood with prosecutorial authority that transformed the elegant dining room into a courtroom. "Mrs. Harrison, your communications with my husband constitute evidence in an active criminal investigation. Connecticut State Police have been notified about systematic inheritance manipulation, and federal authorities are reviewing wire fraud charges based on your interstate communications about asset hiding and extradition avoidance to Monaco." The presentation screen continued displaying evidence with devastating precision. Detailed spreadsheets calculating my life expectancy based on family medical history, research documents about Monaco banking laws, and financial projections showing anticipated trust distributions upon my death. Each piece demonstrated systematic planning that extended far beyond casual conversations into comprehensive criminal conspiracy. "Criminal charges?" Victoria's voice rose to near hysteria. "I never actually stole anything. Those were just fantasies, stupid conversations that Marcus convinced me to have. I'm not a criminal, just a foolish woman who listened to terrible advice about financial planning. Please don't let this destroy our children's lives." My mother, who had remained silent during the initial revelation, finally spoke with quiet authority that carried decades of social sophistication and moral clarity. "Victoria, you discussed my son's death with the casual indifference of someone reviewing stock portfolios. You wore our family jewelry while planning to steal our legacy. You calculated when stress might kill Robert while sleeping in his bed each night. This level of calculated betrayal cannot be forgiven or forgotten." Eleanor continued with clinical precision that eliminated any hope of negotiation. The prenuptial agreement includes specific provisions for marital fraud that void all spousal benefits. Additionally, comprehensive trust amendments have been filed protecting the children's inheritance from any future manipulation attempts. You will leave with personal belongings that predate the marriage and nothing else. Victoria's begging intensified as the full scope of her destruction became undeniable. She turned to each family member with increasing desperation. "Catherine, you have children too. You understand how a mother's fear can drive terrible decisions. Please advocate for some transition support so I can rebuild my life." My sister's response was swift and cold. "A mother protects her children's father, Victoria. She doesn't calculate his death for inheritance money." That's when Patricia delivered the final devastating blow with prosecutorial precision. Marcus was arrested this morning on federal charges, including securities fraud, client manipulation, and conspiracy to commit inheritance theft. His cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors includes detailed testimony about your role in systematic asset research, timeline calculations, and offshore planning. You're facing federal indictment within the week. The dining room fell silent except for Victoria's increasingly desperate sobs as she processed that criminal charges meant potential prison time, permanent record, and complete social exile. Her casual text about waiting for his inheritance had triggered comprehensive federal investigation with consequences that would last decades. Federal prison? Victoria's voice became barely audible. "Robert, please, I know I don't deserve anything, but remember the good years before Marcus poisoned my thinking. I loved you once, before greed destroyed my judgment. Don't let our children grow up knowing their mother is a federal criminal. I'll disappear quietly, sign anything, renounce everything. Just please don't let this destroy them too." My response was measured and final, delivered with the same analytical precision I brought to trust management decisions. "Victoria, You spent months calculating my death timeline while sleeping beside me each night. You researched inheritance law while attending our children's school events. You planned systematic theft while participating in family traditions. This isn't personal destruction. This is systematic justice for systematic betrayal. Eleanor signaled to security personnel who had been discreetly positioned outside the dining room. Mrs. Harrison, you need to gather your personal belongings immediately. The Manor's access codes will be changed within the hour, and any attempt to return will result in trespassing charges. Victoria's final desperate appeal came as uniformed officers entered our family sanctuary. The children need their mother. You can't completely destroy their family over text messages about money. Jake and Ryan will never forgive you for making their mother disappear. But Eleanor's response eliminated even that manipulation attempt. Custody arrangements have been filed, ensuring supervised visitation rights that protect the children while preventing any further financial manipulation attempts. As Victoria was escorted from the Harrison Manor for the final time, carrying only a small suitcase of personal items, her inheritance scheme had cost her everything she'd planned to steal and everything she'd already possessed. The family dinner had delivered exactly what I'd promised: comprehensive legal destruction that made her beg for mercy she didn't deserve while facing federal charges that would ensure permanent consequences. The Harrison Family Trust had survived another sophisticated exploitation attempt, protected by mechanisms established by generations who understand that family wealth requires constant vigilance against those who would manipulate trust for personal gain. Victoria's casual text about inheritance had triggered the most expensive education about targeting generational wealth that anyone could receive. The aftermath unfolded with the systematic precision of a federal trust investigation, each consequence cascading into the next like perfectly documented evidence in a complex inheritance fraud case. Within 72 hours of the Harrison family dinner, Victoria and Marcus discovered that public humiliation was merely the opening statement in their complete destruction. Monday morning brought federal arraignment proceedings at 8 a.m., asset forfeiture orders freezing accounts at 8:02 a.m., and systematic dismantling of their criminal enterprise by noon when Connecticut's legal community learned about the charges. The boring, predictable trust manager had orchestrated the most comprehensive inheritance fraud prosecution in Greenwich history, and every detail had been planned with fiduciary precision that left no possibility of plea negotiation or sentence reduction. Victoria's world evaporated with breathtaking legal efficiency. The Southern District of New York filed comprehensive charges citing conspiracy to commit inheritance fraud, wire fraud across state lines, and attempted financial exploitation of trust assets. Her art consultancy collapsed within a week when wealthy collectors learned their trusted advisor had been calculating her husband's death timeline while planning systematic theft. Professional licensing boards permanently revoked her credentials, while federal asset forfeiture orders seized every luxury item purchased during the marriage, leaving her with court-appointed representation and the reality that federal prosecutors don't negotiate with calculated inheritance manipulation. Marcus faced identical federal charges with additional counts for his leadership role in the systematic exploitation scheme. Federal prosecutors treated him as the operational architect of an inheritance fraud network that had targeted multiple wealthy spouses across Connecticut. His bail was denied due to flight risk and the Monaco relocation planning, while asset forfeiture orders seized his wealth management firm, luxury vehicles, and every offshore account he'd established. The Connecticut Financial Services Commission initiated proceedings for permanent license revocation, while federal tax liens attached to any remaining assets he might attempt to hide. But the most satisfying destruction came from watching their entire support system collapse like a compromised trust structure under audit. Victoria's sister Amanda, who'd encouraged the affair during recorded conversations, discovered that family loyalty has limits when federal investigators ask questions about complicity in inheritance schemes. Artworld colleagues who'd initially defended her quickly distanced themselves when criminal charges became public. Even Marcus, facing decades in federal prison, attempted to negotiate reduced sentences by providing evidence against Victoria's role in timeline calculations and offshore planning. The plea negotiations were swift and merciless. Given overwhelming digital evidence and the public nature of their scheme, both defendants were advised to cooperate fully. After protracted negotiations, Victoria received 14 years in federal prison with extensive restitution orders that would follow her for life. Marcus, deemed the scheme's architect, received 22 years. Eleanor Park ensured the sentences reflected the full scope of their criminal enterprise, including systematic exploitation of trust structures and calculated planning that violated both state and federal laws. The children required careful attention through this devastating revelation. Jake and Ryan, now 13, needed to understand that their mother's actions didn't reflect on them or diminish their place in the Harrison family. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in family crisis intervention, helped them process the complex emotions of loving someone who'd committed serious crimes. "Your mother made terrible choices," I explained during one of our sessions, "but you are Harrison children, raised with our values, and nothing can change that." Their resilience proved stronger than any inheritance scheme, and within months they were thriving again, protected by family structures that had weathered far worse storms. 6 months later, my life had fundamentally transformed in ways that exceeded even my strategic planning. The Harrison Family Trust expanded its protective mechanisms, implementing what we called the Harrison Integrity Protocol, a comprehensive system of triggers that locked down distributions when certain danger signals appeared. Sudden offshore consultations, partner inquiries about medical histories, or conversations that reduced family members to liquidity events. My expertise in detecting inheritance manipulation made me the most sought-after trust manager for families concerned about systematic exploitation. The specialized trust integrity unit I established turned profitable within months, while wealthy families across New England sought comprehensive security audits to protect their legacies. Eleanor Park and I had developed a professional partnership built on mutual respect and shared commitment to protecting family wealth from sophisticated criminal networks. Our collaboration during the federal investigation had revealed intellectual compatibility and strategic alignment that transcended typical working relationships. She was brilliant, ethical, and possessed unwavering dedication to justice that resonated deeply with my values. 10 months after Victoria's sentencing, Eleanor and I were married in a quiet ceremony at the manor, building something genuine from the ashes of destroyed criminal enterprises and turning personal betrayal into meaningful partnership focused on generational wealth protection. The moment of perfect closure came on a crisp spring afternoon when Eleanor and I were having lunch at the Greenwich Country Club, celebrating successful completion of a major case that had protected $60 million in family assets from systematic exploitation. I sat comfortably in my tailored navy suit, natural daylight streaming through expansive windows, reviewing trust documents while enjoying the satisfaction that comes from protecting generational wealth through systematic prosecution of inheritance fraud. Across the dining room, I spotted Victoria's mother sitting alone, wearing clothing that reflected the financial devastation federal asset forfeiture had brought to their family. When she noticed me, her eyes filled with desperate recognition, and she started to approach seeking forgiveness for her daughter's federal crimes. I simply met her gaze with professional indifference, then returned to my documents, dismissing her as completely as Victoria had once dismissed my family's legacy for her personal gain. Some conversations aren't worth having when federal convictions have already provided definitive answers about accountability and consequences. Later that evening, Victoria sent a letter from federal detention. "Robert, I made terrible mistakes. I understand now that you were protecting family wealth while I was planning to steal it. Can we discuss forgiveness when I'm released?" I filed the letter with other case documentation without responding. Federal inheritance fraud spanning months isn't a mistake, and systematic death timeline calculations aren't a marital problem that conversation can resolve. Justice had been served with mathematical precision, and that was sufficient. As Eleanor and I walked home through Greenwich's quiet streets, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed since that evening I found Victoria's texts about waiting for his inheritance with casual indifference that demonstrated months of calculated planning. I'd lost a wife, but gained unshakable professional credibility and a partnership built on shared values rather than shared assets. I'd learned that the most dangerous adversaries are often the quiet experts who appear harmless while possessing capabilities to completely destroy sophisticated criminal enterprises through systematic legal warfare. Victoria had calculated my death timeline like portfolio projections while researching offshore banking and inheritance law. Federal prosecutors had answered her inheritance scheme with legal precision that protected not just my family's wealth, but established precedents that would protect other families from similar exploitation. Her casual text about waiting for inheritance had cost her 14 years in federal prison, and that was the most expensive education about underestimating family wealth protection that anyone could receive. My response had made her beg at family dinner, and justice had followed with inevitable, satisfying precision.